Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Electric Vehicles. Do you have a question? Ask the owners. Tonight, we will get an update on the current state of electric vehicles. We will also hear from owners about their experiences with various types of electric vehicles. And we will be giving you lots of time to ask questions during our Q&A period. My name is Tom Knezovich, and I'm the chairperson for the Nith Valley EcoBoosters. I'm happy to be your host for tonight's event. I'd like to thank our supporters for tonight's event: Kindred Credit Union, the Township of Wilmot, and Future Ground Network, which is a project of the David Suzuki Foundation. Now, at this point, I would like to introduce Neil Lackey. Neil is our first speaker tonight, and he will be giving us our update on the current state of electric vehicles. So over to you, Neil, and I'll stop my sharing. Good, Neil.
Okay, so thanks, Tom. I'll do a more detailed intro of myself when I reveal a brief overview of our trip from Ontario to Newfoundland. Right now, just a brief EV update. I'll be using the terms ICE and BEV throughout this presentation. ICE refers to an internal combustion engine, and BEV refers to an electric battery vehicle. There are also hybrids that use a combination of ICE and BEV, but they usually have a much smaller battery. You can read the slide for yourself. Regarding number one, there are so many changes since our first EV webinar that we are suggesting you do your own internal research. And on the internet, there are lots of places to look. On number two, higher speed charging, public and home, and the ability to use your vehicle to power your house are just two examples of new items that only delivered by EVs. Regarding number three, manufacturers are offering hybrid and BEV models. Unfortunately, in many cases, demand outstrips supply. Purchase prices for EVs seem very high, but we continue to ask you to compare the total cost of ownership, noting that EVs require many fewer parts and much less maintenance than a comparable ICE vehicle. When you get the slides, when you see it online, you should be able to use the links to get more detailed information. If not, we'll include these links in the resource sheet. So big vehicles are electric too. This February 2023 report shows it's clear that EVs are getting bigger, and the operational savings are both environmental and financial. Europe is way ahead of North America in EV adoption. And contrary to warnings about BEV fires, the insurance company research shows something different. Hybrids and ICE cars have many more fires per 100,000 sold. Yes, EV fires are harder to extinguish, and fire departments are upgrading their skills and protocols for EV fires. The statistics show that they have not had to use their new skills very much on EVs. Rather than try to list all EVs available, please complete your online searches to narrow in on the type of vehicle that would best suit your daily needs. Any two-car household can seriously consider a switch to an EV for one of their vehicles. Wait times can be from a few months to 18 or more months for a delivery of a new EV. Quebec and BC have mandated sales levels on a tighter time frame than the federal government. So wait times are shorter in those two provinces because manufacturers ship to where there are more incentives. Traveling across Canada is now possible in an EV. These are the fast level 3 charger locations as of February 2023. Remember, 98% of your charging will be done at night unless you live in accommodation where your in-home charging is not available. Due to a recent federal commitment, many more chargers will be coming to Ontario. If you are hoteling it, you should ask if the hotel has an overnight charger. The more guests asking, the more likely hotels will be to respond to that demand. It's interesting to note that some Tim Hortons locations are installing level 2 chargers so that while you get your coffee and donut, you can actually add a few kilometers to your car. These are the fuel apps on my smartphone to help me locate and charge. I'm not pleased that I have so many apps, but these are applicable to non-Tesla EVs. Tesla has its own charging network, and Tesla owners can use an adapter to charge at a public network. The circle around PlugShare is because that app does show many of the charging stations, including the Tesla network. As of March 2023, paying for your session through PlugShare is not yet available in Canada. At this time in Canada, most commercial charging stations require you to have their specific app to start and pay for a charging session. That means commercial EV charging brands place EV drivers at a disadvantage compared to ICE drivers who can just use their credit card on a gas pump. Talking about fuel, you're probably aware that Canada's carbon pricing will increase every April 1st until 2030. Fuel costs are climbing for ICE vehicles. So far in Canada, electric rates have been relatively stable and comparatively lower than in the United States. On your EV, it's important to read your warranty and required service details, and remember to service the brakes regularly because your EV may not use them quite as much. And so the next slide is our cost comparison between an ICE and a BEV. These are the assumptions made on what you will see in the next slide, comparing the financing and fuel costs between two vehicles where the only difference is that one is an ICE and the other is a BEV. Here it comes. Financing an electric vehicle is comparable to financing an equivalent ICE vehicle. Once the lower maintenance costs of the BEV are considered, the BEV is less expensive. Remember that total cost of ownership idea. With that in mind, I'm going to do a brief focused overview of my personal long trip BEV story. So this ends the update, but there will be more in our Q&A for you on specific questions you may have. We traveled in a Chevy Bolt in July of 2022. Some of you may remember that the price of gasoline last summer was close to $2 per liter. We are a two-person, both retired household with one vehicle, and we took delivery of our 2019 Bolt in 2018 August. So we've had 4 winters with that Bolt. We're driving about 21,000 kilometers per year. And regarding number 5 and number 6 on this slide, 80% is the etiquette for public chargers, since the last 20% on a battery electric vehicle takes much longer to deliver. So don't delay other drivers by trying to charge to 100% at a commercial station. We did run into that a couple of times on our trip where we had to wait longer because the driver connected wanted to get 100% charge. All the slides that follow are about our experience in the Bolt. Others will have different experiences and different driving habits. For instance, Tesla has no charging units in Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. So Tesla owners need to purchase an adapter for public charging stations. In one instance, we actually found a Tesla owner who had purchased the adapter and continued to use public charging stations because the fees were lower than at the Tesla chargers. That's their experience, which we heard at one station. So here's a picture of the Energuide that was on our Bolt when it was new. Notice that the spec here says 17.6 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, but Over here, when we start our bolt, it says 15.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And that's the thing that comes up every time on our bolt. So that's something that's different from the spec page. This annual fuel cost here is an estimate for traveling 20,000 kilometers per year. And on this side of the bolt in the blue circle, you'll see the max being 678, the middle being 575, and the minimum being 471. This is how we started out on the first day of our travels. And these actuals will vary based on your driving habits. The computer connects with how your bolt is being used and gives you these averages to predict your next trip. Over here is what the bolt is using at this point in time. Just at idle, it uses 1 kilowatt hour or kilowatt. So for 1 hour, it would use up 1 kilowatt sitting on idle. So that's the information that you get and how you could monitor how your fuel is being used and how much you have left. On our trip, we plan to stop approximately every when the middle number here would get down to around 250 to 180, and that's when we would top up. Just like in an ICE vehicle, don't wait until it reads empty before you go get some fuel. The apps we used the most on our trip were these ones with the arrows, and IV Charge has just completed the change to credit card payment, so EV drivers are treated the same as ICE drivers when paying at IV Charge. They're the ones along 401 mostly at this time. All others still require their proprietary app for you to charge up at their stations. And we never had to go more than 1 to 5 kilometers off our route to charge. Most charging was right at the highway near a snack bar or a restaurant. So here's our experience comparing our Bolt, 2019 Bolt, to the 2019 Chevrolet Sonic. Both of these vehicles are assembled on the same GM line in Michigan, USA, although the Sonic is no longer produced at this point. In the summer of 2022, our Bolt saved over 50% on fuel costs compared to the Sonic on the trip, the 7,700 kilometer trip to Newfoundland and back. You can see the cost here at $5.98 per 100 kilometers. That was our actual cost, and compared to $13.23 per 100 kilometers in theory for the Sonic. We don't know what the Sonic would actually be based on the weather patterns, hills, and winds we experienced. The only fluid going into the Bolt was windshield washer fluid. Brakes may need to be serviced annually to prevent corrosion due to lack of use, and we found that out the hard way. On the road charging for us, the commercial rates were between $15 and $20 per hour. And they charge for parking, since electricity in most provinces can only be sold by regulated suppliers. In 2023, this is beginning to change in the US to sales per kilowatt hour. Regarding number 3 above, the charge flow, for example, our Bolt maximum that it can receive from any charger is 55 kilowatts. That's like the flow of gasoline, the size of the hose, and it's based on what the battery can take. Current home chargers on 240 volt circuits may deliver between 7 and 12 kilowatts and require a 40, 50, or 50 amp breaker. Newer chargers, or 60 amp home chargers, can deliver up to 20 kilowatts. On our trip, we encountered 50 kilowatt flows because the chargers could only deliver 50 kilowatts, even though our Bolt could have accepted more. So planning a trip takes a lot of, forethought at this point in time. This slide shows a printout from the Flow app that we use, showing our charging details. Here, 34.9 kilowatts, $17.15 at the pump, and it gave us 271 additional kilometers of range. It took 51 minutes to do that. And if you look at just above it, there are two at 0. The charger at this location showed on our app as available, but both were out of service. A phone call only confirmed that they were reported out of service several hours prior to our arrival, but the app had not been updated. This is one of the inconveniences that EV drivers can experience. The phone call enabled us to find another non-flow charger 30 kilometers further along our route. So just remember, most charging will happen overnight at home on a level 2 charger. We took our home 240 volt plug-in charger with us and were able to charge to 100% overnight at a Newfoundland friend's house on 2 occasions. We sent him a $20 thank you and included that in our costs for charging on this trip. Newfoundland has some of the cheapest power rates in Canada. On the road, what happens if you run out of charge? We have purchased but never used CAA tow except on our ICE vehicle, and that is our old 2007 Murano being loaded onto a tow truck. BEV road trips are currently possible all across Canada along the Trans-Canada Highway, but you may have to wait to charge if others are there before you arrive. From our experience, taking a family on a long trip in Canada would not be pleasant due to the charging time currently required. Newer cars are now charging from 20% to 80% in around 20 minutes. So they're the 800 volt. They can accept that kind of charge from a charging station. In our opinion, Canada and the provinces need to incentivize installation of at least 2 fast chargers at every location where a fast charger is installed, as well as increasing the number of fast charging locations. Quebec, in our experience, was far ahead of the other provinces, though we were pleasantly surprised with the frequency of single fast chargers in Newfoundland. Apps are essential, and knowing where the charging stations are located and operating can be challenging on long trips. We actually planned our trip with charger locations A and B, and they were about 200 to 280 kilometers apart. A and B. So if A was busy or out of service, B was still within our range to top up and proceed. So evidence shows that EVs are much better for our environment. Earth is in a climate crisis. EVs are one way for people to do their part to mitigate the disastrous effects of climate change, especially with the scientists this week through the UN issuing a warning, once again, that especially the developed nations need to pick up their pace of addressing climate change and reducing carbon emissions. But now is the time to hear from some other EV owners. Please use the Q&A to submit any questions and identify the name of the person you'd like to provide an answer. If no name's indicated, we'll open it up to the entire panel. Our presenters tonight are Eric Stevens and Ashley Van Andel, Julie Utzi, and Ian Graham. Ashley and Julie have provided videos, and they will be shown one after the other. So I'm going to stop my screen share now and turn it over to you, Eric. Take it away.
Thank you, Neil. Yes, so a great presentation there, Neil. Thank you very much. So I've been driving plug-in vehicles for over 10 years now. I started my journey with a 2013 Chevrolet Volt back in August of 2012 was the first one that I owned. Today, my wife and I own a 2018 Chevrolet Volt and a 2018 Chevrolet Bolt EV. So the Volt is a plug-in hybrid and the Bolt EV is a full battery electric vehicle. Back in 2018, when we purchased these vehicles, the concept was, the charging infrastructure still wasn't built out very well. So we wanted to have a sort of a backup vehicle that was still relatively friendly at the time, to just in case there was a usage case that our electric vehicle could not do. And I can safely say in 5 years now, we've actually never encountered a scenario where our battery electric vehicle was not able to do the job. So we've been able to do that fully. And actually now I'm reserving a new vehicle that will replace my Volt, hopefully in the near future. So with another battery electric vehicle. So we'll be full electric, hopefully by the end of this year. Now for charging, for the most part at home, we charge at home 98% of the time, as Neil mentioned in his presentation. Occasionally we do use public charging. You know, if we do a trip into Toronto or something like that, roughly half of the public chargers in Toronto today, or parking garages in Toronto today, have charging level 2 charging stations at them now. So they're becoming quite frequent and common. Or sometimes we have family that lives towards the Windsor-Chatham area, and you know, occasionally in the wintertime we might have to do a 10 or 15-minute top up at a DC fast charger. So those are the only times we ever really use public charging, or if we go on a longer road trip. For maintenance, pretty much our vehicles gets looked at a couple times a year, and that's pretty much to change the tires. I go from winter to summer tires, and to get the brakes serviced. The only time we've actually had any issues with our cars is that the brake rotors, again, because of regenerative braking, sometimes the brakes don't get used as much, and the rotors sometimes will rust a bit faster and wear a bit faster because of that. So we've had to have the brake rotors replaced on our cars, but outside of that, our cars have been flawless, no issues whatsoever, and no oil changes, very little maintenance. And basically we predominantly used our Bolt EV for our full electric vehicle for our long distance travel. For the Volt has been, our plug-in hybrid vehicles, largely relegated as my daily commuter now, because you know, I have what's called gas anxiety, where I try not to burn gasoline as much as possible, and I would rather avoid doing that. The longest road trip we've been on actually is in 2019. We actually took our Bolt EV to Florida and back again. And that was an interesting journey at the time, because the infrastructure was still a little premature at the time. But today that journey would be much easier with the infrastructure has improved immensely in that time frame, and I look forward to doing some more trips. And you know, one of the things I love about EVs, and this is something that maybe most people don't realize, is I personally find it convenient. I always hated going to gas stations, especially in February, having to pump gas at out in the cold. You know, an EV, yes, the car might take a few hours to charge every day, but for my time, it's 10 seconds. I get home, plug it in, and I walk away. And the next morning I wake up and it's fully charged. It's like waking up with a full tank of gas every day. And it literally takes about 10 seconds of my time. So I found EVs very convenient. And, you know, I find the torque absolutely intoxicating. Electric vehicles are so responsive, and they feel effortlessly while you're driving them. And so I absolutely love that feeling. I love that sensation, and I love that they're quiet. So that's my experience.
Thanks, Eric. So we're going to move now, and I'm just going to ask Tom to start the 2 video presentations, Ashley and Julie.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I'm the owner of a 2017 Chevy Bolt. We bought it used from Applewood, the Applewood car dealership in Mississauga, and we bought it in 2019. So it was 2 years old when we bought it, and so we've had it for 4 years. We mostly use it for driving in the city, in and around KW, and it works really well for that because we can use it has a regenerative braking system, so we can use the regen braking in the city a lot, because you do get, some slower driving and stop and start kind of driving. So, it regenerates so well that, sometimes like I don't even lose any kilometers while I'm driving, or I'll even end up with more than when I left, because it regenerates the battery so well. So it works really well for that. We do sometimes also use it for a few longer trips, not a lot. We'll go to New Hamburg. We do go to New Hamburg often, and like, or to Hamilton or somewhere. So some bit longer trips, but we can easily make it there and back because it has quite a good range. We do really like the range on it because it can get us most anywhere we want to go. We have done a couple longer trips, like to Blue Mountain, so it does have enough range to get all the way there, even in the winter, but then not there and back. So we slept over when we went, so we charged there overnight, and the Blue Mountain does have charging charge point, charging stations, and so we did charge there overnight, and then we had a full charge to be able to come back, so that worked pretty well. And my favorite feature about this car, I would say, is the regenerative braking. There's a mode called L mode. So instead of putting it in drive, you can put it in L mode, and then it's one pedal driving. So whenever you let your foot off the gas, it will start to brake, but using the regenerative brake, which is pretty neat. So it's like easy one pedal driving, but also you constantly using your regenerative braking system to keep regenerating the battery.
Hello, my name is Julie Yitzi. I am an electric vehicle owner. I became an electric vehicle owner in March of 2022 when I ordered a Ford Mustang Mach-E. It came brand new to me in July of 2022, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it ever since. What might you ask do I enjoy about it? Well, I'll tell you. I enjoy the way that I no longer have to touch the pedal to brake. That's right, you use one pedal to do gas, and once you let your foot off that gas pedal, the car comes to a complete stop all on its own. To me, this is revolutionary. I love it. What else do I like about my EV? I like that I do not have to make any more stops at the gas station. It's great. I am saving time by not having to go, fill up, and pay out for gas. Instead, when it needs to be charged, I wait until the electricity rates are low. So anytime after 7 p.m., we'll plug it in, and by the time I'm awake at 7 a.m. the next morning, it's fully charged and good to go. I tell you, that too is a game changer. And one more thing I really love about my EV compared to when I drove a combustible engine vehicle is the get up and go. I can be sitting at a stoplight, and if I'm the first in line and it turns green, I sometimes like to just go.
Thanks, Julie and Ashley. And now I'm just going to ask Ian if he's ready to present his brief overview of the EV driving that he's experienced. Ian.
Hi, my name's Ian Graham, and I've been driving electric vehicles going on now for 8 years. In terms of history, just to even go even further back, in 2007, I fought the gas companies by buying a 1994 GMC 3500 one-ton van that was diesel, and I ran it on waste vegetable oil for 8 years. Over time, of course, that vehicle got older, and I got reached out to WR Voltec, a local Volt user group, and went to Detroit and saw where they built the Volt. And 2 weeks later, I had a 2015 Chevy Volt, and I loved that car for 3 years. And then I got an opportunity to purchase a 2018 Model 3. Reservations had come out for 2016. My neighbor had originally put in a day one reservation and decided to not get, as she said, so much car, and instead I took a reservation. And so I've been driving that now for quite some time, and recently just hit well over 130,000 kilometers on it. What I enjoy with driving an electric vehicle as many have said, is the acceleration is incredible and so much fun. I love seeing, people's smiles light up when I hit that pedal and go. I love the safety aspect of electric vehicles. There is the technology safety aspect, but just the car in general is so much safer on many facets. I love the charge at home for cheap. The fact that there's really not much in the way of maintenance other than the tire rotations from winter to summer. And one thing that you will find with myself is I have my home, which has a 10 kilowatt solar array. I also have a cabin about 6 hours north of here, which is completely off the grid with solar. And I'm actually lucky. I have a property in Mexico, which also recently just got outfitted with solar. That is something that with electric vehicles, you are now owning and can take control of your power for the electric vehicle by getting involved with the solar aspect of it. It's kind of like putting your own oil refinery in your backyard, and not only are you powering your car, but you're also, of course, helping with your home energy consumption. And it's an area that your car, as we're seeing vehicle to grid technology come about, will actually help our grid quite a bit. One other quick thing in terms of solar is 2 summers ago, I converted a 21-foot gas pontoon boat to solar electric using bifacial panels as a canopy, charging 4 Tesla batteries, and then a 20 horsepower electric motor on the back. And in terms of travel, like I mentioned, go back and forth to my cabin, spring, summer, fall. That's a good 6 hours there, 6 hours back. I stop and charge once for around 20 minutes. I've gone out to Quebec. And recently, while I was in Mexico, I had dinner with 2 people from Quebec, one with an Ioniq 5, one with a Model 3, and both have driven from around the Quebec City area to Puerto Vallarta in their electric vehicles. One did 19,500 kilometers and it cost them around $600. I love hearing these stories of what electric vehicle drivers are doing and pushing the limits. And one last comment, if you're still driving a gas vehicle, and it's great to see that we got so many interested people in this, I look at gas vehicles as rotary phones when it comes to the technology. It's dated, it's inefficient, and it's not moving forward to what we need to meet our climate goals. And quite honestly, it's a pain in the butt compared to an electric vehicle.
Thanks, Ian. So right now, we're going to move into the question and answer time and I'm going to take one of the questions that came in earlier, just before the seminar. And it says, is there anything about owning and driving an EV that you have experienced that you had not expected when you bought it? This could be a positive or a negative outcome. So I'm just going to ask all the panelists to turn on their videos now. And when you're ready to speak to a question, just unmute yourself. So anything about owning and driving an EV that you have experienced that you had not expected when you bought it, and this could be a positive or negative outcome. Who'd like to try that one on for size?
I'll take a first stab at it there, Neil.
Okay, Eric.
So one of the things I love the most about it is, and this is one of the later questions as well too, is how it does in the winter. I mean, yes, you do lose range in the winter, but one of the things I love the most is I have Reynolds in my hands. So my hands tend to overreact to the cold, and I get numbness in my hands. And one of the things I love is I can leave my car parked in my garage. I can remote start it, so I don't have to worry about exhaust fumes or anything like that. Preheat the cabin so the cabin is nice and warm, and then get in my car and drive off. So I have a warm car in my garage, fully charged when I leave in the morning every morning. And I don't have to touch, a really cold steering wheel or anything like that to do that. So it's one thing I really loved about owning an EV that you can't do with a gas car.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
I will say the one benefit, and it's more, I guess, if you got the time, but I read some interesting comments from people when Bolt was one of them, and that had come up from New Hampshire, and they went and visited in the Nova Scotia area, and they ended up finding a charger in a completely off the road beaten, path. And they said because of that, they met some interesting locals, got to see some sites that most people didn't get to see. And quite honestly, I keep hearing this more and more, is like, when you find those interesting places to charge, and that could be a campsite as well, sometimes that's actually makes your trip that much more interesting. And places and sites you may not have seen otherwise because of going, the regular routes.
Thanks. Anyone else want to tackle that question? If not, we'll move on. There's a question from the Q&A. I have a small utility trailer. Are there EVs coming which are strong enough to pull a load of up to 1,000 pounds?
So my Model 3 towed that converted pontoon boat, which was 3,500 pounds, 500 kilometers north to the cabin. I pushed the limits. It's rated for 2,000 pounds. And you know what, like, and Eric had brought this up too about the torque, the acceleration, but the power in these electric motors is pretty incredible. And I think the big aspect is you always want to be safe. I would suggest to this person to get in touch with Can-Am RV out of London. They've towed Airstreams with Model 3s as well as Model S recently to Colorado.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Ian's comment there, that there is quite a few models that are actually on the market today that can tow more than 1,000 pounds. Vehicles like the Audi e-tron, the Volkswagen ID.4, of course, you've got like the Ford F-150 Lightning, you've got Jaguar I-Pace even, and there's a number coming to market now today too that also have tow ratings that will exceed 1,000 pounds. Quite a few coming to market now that are capable of doing. Even the new Cadillac Lyriq that's on the market, I think, can tow 3,500 pounds. So there's quite a few options coming to market.
And my hunch is that when you tow something, you notice something happened to your range. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Mine was a good 60% down at 3,500 kilometers. I charged from Kitchener. I went to Owen Sound and I got there with 16 kilometers left. That was a little nerve-wracking, but that's kind of part of the fun. I then went to Tobermory, stayed overnight, charged at a campsite there that had a charger, took the ferry across, got to my cabin, no problem.
Okay, good. Thank you. Back to one of the questions that came in before. What was the top 1 or 2 determining factors that resulted in you choosing the specific EV that you chose or purchased? Would you like to, I'm just going to ask one of our video presenters if they would like to tackle that question. What were the top 1 or 2 determining factors to choose an EV for you? Julie, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Well, for one thing, I have relatives that own a Ford dealership, so I wanted to be able to be a patron to them and show my appreciation. I love the Mustang as a car throughout the ages, and I wanted to do it simply for climate change. Being part of the EcoBoosters these past 4 years has shown me the importance to be a responsible citizen of this world, do my part where I can, and yeah, just want to do the best that I can, socially responsible.
Thank you. Ashley, do you want to chat? What you bought a used one, and that may be different than the rest of us here.
Yeah, so the reason we chose ours, like a big part of it was price. So like a Bolt, and it was going to be our only car. So we needed something with a big range that we could actually get places, and then also that was, you know, somewhat affordable. And even in the last few years since we bought it, like things have changed quite a bit in terms of how much they cost. So as far as like the bolts, like the value seems to have decreased, or like they're just aren't as expensive as they were when we bought it. So yeah, so it was the lowest price for what kind of like what we needed, what we were looking for. So it seemed like the most affordable. We test drove it, and it had, you know, a lot of the features that we wanted in a car, so it worked out. It's very roomy inside, actually. You wouldn't think so because it looks like a small car, but it's very roomy. A lot of space.
Good, thanks. So I'm thinking that we'll move on at this point, and the next question is about a person who has test driven Chev EUV Bolt 23 at Plug and Drive, and they felt comfortable with the pickup at 60 kilometers per hour. If anyone is an owner of a Chevy Bolt, how do you find the pickup ability of this car at 100 kilometers per hour on or expressway or highway? And I'm just going to really jump in and just say, it's wonderful. I no longer feel reluctant to pull out and pass, even on a 2-lane highway, when I know that I've got the torque and the pickup to do that. I think that that's, again, in joining a highway and getting up to the 100 kilometers or more. It's just a fast experience in our Bolt. I have not driven a Chevy Bolt EUV, but it's built on the same platform. So I'm expecting the same from the 200 horsepower electric motor with the 65 kilowatt battery. Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
I can add to that a little bit there, Neil. Yeah, the experience is the same, basically. My aunt actually owns a 22 Bolt EUV, actually, and it rides very similar to the Bolt EV. Slightly heavier, but for most part, the ride is basically the same. But yeah, the speed limiter on the Bolt EV is 150 kilometers an hour. And while I don't make a practice of ever going near that, it is not hard to get there. So it can get there in a hurry. So
yeah. The next question is something that you're going to have to ask your dealer about. When buying a new EV, what are the mandatory extra fees that must be paid? And in all the mandated advertising now, you're going to see the full price of the vehicle, and they have to say what fees are not included in that. And your dealer's going to tell you how much they are. We can't tell you that. Okay, so that one's done, and I'm just going to go back to this is one that is about the batteries, and what's the person is wondering about batteries, battery life, battery disposal. Although I would say no, never dispose of the battery, because there are valuable elements in it that can be reclaimed. Battery replacement, and I just have found out that at the moment there's no agreed European or international standard on vehicle life cycle assessment for batteries or electric vehicles. How you assess the vehicle doesn't have a standard. So we've going to put a link to that research in our updated. But the question is wondering about batteries, battery life, battery disposal, battery replacement. Ian, go ahead.
If I could answer that, Eric and I do a monthly podcast, and we talk about batteries quite a bit, actually. And that's one of the biggest myths that we constantly hear, is that, oh, they go to landfill or they're disposed of, and that's complete baloney. I can name you at least 3 companies right now in North America that are actually recycling the batteries pretty much 100%. One of them is actually on the stock exchange with the symbol LICE, not the most favorite symbol. But when it comes to the battery life, most EVs were looking at a minimum of 500,000 kilometers. You're looking also like there's an 8-year warranty with these batteries. And when it comes to replacement, a lot of people are not understanding that the replacement of a battery is not the whole pack. In many cases, let's say there's 16 modules in a car, one of the modules may have an issue. So why are you replacing the whole pack? And I know, there was a bit of a recall with at one point, and there was you're getting a full new pack, which was great. But that being said, just as the recyclability aspect, the 4 Model S batteries that I put in my pontoon boat, they were taken apart from a Model S that was salvaged. And I'm not kidding when I say this, by a 13-year-old kid who basically took the whole car apart and sold it piece by piece. So those batteries, like you said, are valuable, and it doesn't make any sense to just dispose of them. The other quick thing I should add is that we are finding more technology advancements about why the batteries, what problems they do have. We're figuring those out. 2 recent things recently came up on that. And also the recyclability of the batteries, funny enough, when they're actually recycled, they actually become better because the lithium is actually purified even more. And that's also a recent study in Ohio State that was done.
Thanks, Ian. Do anybody want to add anything to that? That's very clear answer. Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's Ian mentioned several companies. There's one here in Ontario called Li-Cycle, and they're now delivering materials to manufacturers today. And not only that, but there's batteries today, and typically most batteries will. I think the average age of a car in North America is about 12 years, and most batteries will last the life of a car. The thing is, though, even after that car goes to a recycler and goes to salvage, those batteries will often live a life after that and go for like grid-tied storage or other applications as well too. Those batteries will continue to live on even in other applications and other uses before they even get recycled and stuff. And one of the challenges that they're facing today is there's battery recyclers today, but one of the things they're finding right now is they're actually not getting enough source material. There's actually not enough EV batteries being recycled right now because they're lasting much longer than they originally anticipated. Most of the manufacturers, when they test the batteries, they test to a very adverse condition. And most people today are not subjecting those cars today to those conditions. So they're actually lasting longer than most people realized.
Thanks, Eric and Ian. I'm going to just move on to another question, and this may be something that is applicable to all of us to say something about. What range degradation during cold winter drives what is it really like? My Kitchener to Toronto drive is around 240 kilometers round trip. And I know cruising at 125 kilometers per hour can also reduce range greatly. So with the average EV, can I safely make this trip and keep the heater on so I don't freeze during the drive? And he references in a report that states an EV loses 52% of its range during cold highway drive. I'm curious, this person is curious, what have you owners experienced? Who'd like to go first on that one? I think we all need to have an input on that.
I can start on that one, I guess, too, there, Neil. Basically myself, I see on average about a 30 to 35% range loss in the wintertime. And it depends on how hard I run the cabin heater and if I precondition the car and stuff like that beforehand as well, too. And so that's my typical thing. I would say if you have a 240 kilometer round trip, most EVs with a 400 kilometer range would probably give you a good safety factor doing that. And then there are now even EVs today with different heating technologies in them. Some of them have resistive heaters. Some of them now have heat pump systems in them as well too, which varies how efficient they are when they drive in the winter. So there's little things out there you can do. And the other thing that people don't realize too sometimes is that a lot of EVs now have heated seats and heated steering wheels, and they use far less power. A heated seat uses like 90 watts of power. A heated steering wheel uses about 60 watts of power. But your cabin heater often uses 5,000 to 7,000 watts of heat. So using heated seats and heated steering wheel, the direct heating method actually is much more efficient and keeps you pretty comfortable. And there's little tips and tricks you can do to extend your range while staying comfortable in an EV.
Other winter experiences. Ashley.
So in our Chevy Bolt, we have you know, probably a similar loss of range, I guess. You know, probably about like a 250 kilometer trip would be safe. You would be able to make that happen. We actually have a bit more range in our Bolt now than we did because we were part of the recall and got our battery replaced. So we do in summer now, like get probably up to 500 kilometers. But yeah, I would say about in winter, we do lose quite a bit. It would be like, now that we have the better battery, maybe like around 300, it would predict. And yeah, you'd be safe with 250 for a trip.
Thanks, Ashley. That's also my experience in the Bolt, that we're down from 400 to about 300 in the winter. It can be sometimes less depending on how cold it is. But again, that beginning, before you start out, heating it up in the garage just keeps that range at its max. So it's good.
I did a trip to Huntsville a couple winters ago, and I did some guessing like with that because I always heard the 50% range loss, and no, it was more like 20-25%. And one other thing people kind of forget about with winter, the cold is definitely a factor, but also the road aspect, how cleared off the roads are, the wind aspect. You know, if you're driving in a cold wintry night that the roads aren't that cleared off, you're going to be using more energy as well as with a gas vehicle. I don't know if for any of you, like, you won't notice it so much in gas cars, but driving from Kitchener to Toronto is less energy than driving from Toronto to Kitchener because we have an incline. So all those things are like, all these factors. I always kind of laugh when people say like, oh, you lose this much range, and you know, how fast are you driving? Are you doing like 110 on the 401 or 140? Like all these things, it's a difficult math equation. Let's put it that way. A lot of variables.
I know that we lent our Bolt to my son who commutes to Toronto, but at his workplace, they have a level 2 charger. He got free fuel for over a month. And his commute was 45 minutes to an hour, 15 minutes each way, depending on traffic. So I think that winter driving, yes, you have to look at your range and you have to make some plans for that. A little bit different, but they can do it. Again, in our Q&A tonight, we have, we can't do any recommendations about brands, and people are going to have to look online for that. So we're just going to recommend that any brand questions we won't be able to answer. That's not part of what we can do in this event. So question for, if you are having a technical problem with your car, Tesla are very good at logging into your car to diagnose and fix problems. Are other car manufacturers as responsive? For those of you at Tesla, or for those, does your manufacturer log into your car to deal with the problems? I haven't had a problem for that, but
yeah, I would say, and you can probably verify this too, Neil, as well too. But you know, both my Volt and Bolt, you know, General Motors emails me a report every month with my car, giving me a diagnostic report, showing me, you know, how is the car, how are the tire pressures, any recall status, and it goes through and it does a little check to see if there's any issues at all in the car as well too. So it gives me a report every month, giving me that, and it even gives if there is some suggested service that's required or anything like that, it'll mention that as well.
Is that your experience too, Julie, with monthly updates on your car?
I don't get the emails, but I'm often getting updates that come over and I see them on my app. So I have an app on my phone, and I do get updates quite a bit that Ford is going into the car and updating my programs, and they're explaining to me what they're doing. So they're very responsive in that respect, keeping the program updated, the software updated for sure.
Okay. What did it cost to prepare your house or garage for EV charging?
I've installed two chargers actually. The first one was for the Chevy Volt, and then I installed a Tesla charger, and again did it myself. The charger was around $600. The wiring was around $120 for that, the wiring and the breaker, and then just some like grunt labor. I know I will hear my friend Simon say, you need to get an electrician, but quite honestly, if you can install a stove plug or a dryer outlet, it's not much different than that. It's basically, it's about, I don't want to say as simple as that, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah, the first house I was in, I had an electrician come in and run some of the line for me, because drilling through the foundation, I didn't want to do that myself. But basically, the charge station was about $400 or $500 at the time, and then the electrician was $600 at the time. And then now I live in a new house, actually in Listowel. It was a new build, and then I actually worked with the builder and the electrician to actually install 2 stove plugs in the garage, basically up front. So I don't know what the actual cost was. It was kind of worked into the entire wiring of the house. So.
I know. Go ahead, Ashley.
We also installed our own, so we saved money on not having to get an electrician, and so we just paid for the charger itself, which we got from Costco actually, and you just like any of the wiring.
Okay. So we did much the same, just a stove plug in the garage. And that's what our friend had, a garage with a stove in it. We unplugged a stove and plugged in the car, and we were fine. Yeah. So
Neil, can I jump in? I'm not officially on the panel, but for our situation, I just wanted to mention, for some people, you might have to upgrade your panel. We had to upgrade our electrical panel from 120 to 200 amps, and this was not just because of the EV. We were also putting a heat pump in. So ours was not an easy job. So I don't want to make it sound like for everyone this is going to be a piece of cake. We had to run new wiring. It's a major job. I would say, to be on the high side, you would be possibly looking between $4,000 and $6,000 to get an electrician in and to do an upgrade, panel upgrade, run new wiring, and all that kind of stuff. So this is on the high side, but I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, I wanted to just jump in there too with Tom. There's actually some new solutions in the market today too, for people who are in that situation, who have maybe like a 100 amp panel in their house, stuff like that now too. So there's actually some new solutions on the market for people who they're load monitoring systems that can, if the load in your house gets too high, can actually shut off your car charger. And there are also systems out there that can power share with, say, a clothes dryer or something like that as well too. So if you want to there are load management systems now and smarter systems out there today that can make sure you don't exceed the rating of your panel today. So there's some new solutions coming to the market that are pretty interesting there.
Yes, and Andy, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, you're talking about the cost of a new panel. I got a new panel. I already had a car charger, but I had to get a new panel to put in my heat pump, and that was only $2,200. So And that was an upgrade from a 125 amp to a 200 amp panel. So it may not be that expensive. The second thing I wanted to mention, though, is getting chargers. I was just looking at them online the other day, and there's availability issues, just like supply chains for a lot of things. People are having trouble getting them. Flow chargers are sold out. There's a 3 to 4 week wait time for charge point charger. And anyway, just if you're thinking about getting an electric car, do some of this electrical work up front before the car is delivered. Otherwise, you're going to be wondering what you're going to do to charge it.
110 charging is okay, but it's not the best thing on that either. And actually, for availability, funny enough, I keep an eye on auction sites and just won a Tesla charger off an auction site for $460. So I'm not sure if that's going up north or it's going to Mexico yet. I have to figure that one out.
Yeah. And I would also add the comment that some new EVs now are coming with charge cords that are capable of charging at 240 volt ratings. So you may not need to purchase one. The one that comes with the car might suit your needs perfectly fine.
And I would just make the comment that we're all talking about battery electric vehicles. For hybrids, a plug-in with your 110 volt is probably all you're going to need because they're much smaller batteries. So if you're into a hybrid, you may not have to do any additional, if it's a plug-in hybrid, you may not have to do any additional electrical work. Our daughter has a plug-in hybrid and she just plugs it into an outlet in her garage, standard outlet. Okay. So we're there's a question that came from Neil, Neil. Didn't understand your trip range. The numbers average 500 kilometers up to 600 plus. Is that with regeneration? The advertised range is 417. That's what happens in the summer when you've got perfect conditions and you've been driving in perfect conditions for a while. Your computer is looking at how you drive, what kind of terrain you're driving on, what the weather's been like, and it's saying, based on your past driving habits, this is the range you're going to get. We had a beautiful sunny day to start off. We didn't charge until we were going to charge around Ajax from our home in Wellesley. We were going to go to Ajax. We ended up going to Coburg before we charged at an IV charge on the 401. And then it was just a bit of a top up before we got to our first campsite for the night. And when we go to campsite now, even though we're tenters, we book an electric site so that we can just plug in our home charger into the electric site. It's the 110 volt. And usually by the morning, because we're just topping up, we've got close to 100% by the morning if we plug in as soon as we get there around 4:30, 5 o'clock at night. So we're giving it 12, 14 hours to charge. Okay. Regarding charging, Jeff says, I actually did 110 volt charging for the first month of owning our used 2016 Kia Soul EV. It kept up with my 50 kilometer round trip daily commute just fine. Thanks for the info. That's great. How do EVs perform in snow? Concerned about getting stuck in deep snow or sliding more than ICE vehicles. And go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so how do EVs do in the snow? The answer is absolutely fantastic. I'll say EVs come by default with a low rolling resistance tire, the all-season tires that come with. Those tires are not particularly good in winter conditions. They can be a little slipperier and a little slidier. So I'd highly recommend that people use winter tires. Get winter tires for your EV is for most people, unless you're living in town and commonly not driving in those types of conditions. But I live in Listowel, so I get quite a bit of snow up my way and drive to Elmira every day. So I have winter tires in my car. And the one thing that I love about electric vehicles is because they're so responsive, the traction control system can respond very quickly to the inputs of the car. So it can detect when the car is sliding faster, and it can find the points of traction faster. So you can tune the traction control system in an EV much better than you can in a combustion vehicle. EVs perform extremely well in winter conditions. They get extremely good traction. And there's been many times where I've gone through 2-foot snow drifts in my car and past 4-wheel drive pickup trucks that are stuck in the ditch. So and sometimes they'll just sit there and they'll just plow through the snow. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Okay. This is an electrical question, and it is typical neighborhood transformers feed 10 to 15 houses with 125 amp services. Please comment if 50% of houses converted to a BEV with 200 amp service, will the utilities be able to handle the demand in this car-centric BEV world, I think he meant. Who would like to tackle that one? Eric or Ian?
I can take a shot at that one too.
Okay, Eric.
This one is, I actually attended a webinar at the University of Waterloo for this one as well too. And this one is a little bit of a concern. Basically, it's what they call the last mile energy delivery system. And some utilities may have to upgrade local transformers if a lot of people are doing this. Though most people charge their EVs at night as well too, when the demands are lower. As well too, so that typically doesn't put as much abuse on the system. Though these systems are usually, these transformers are usually built to cool down at night as well too. So that is an area of infrastructure that does need to be probably upgraded over time, but it can be upgraded over time as well too. It is something that will gradually happen over time. Some people talk about power generation in general. That's actually not too big of a concern. But when you get down to the local last mile electric generation, there are some potential concerns there. But we've gone through similar shifts in history when everybody started installing air conditioners and everybody started installing refrigerators. And so now we're going to electric cars. Yeah, we may have to scale up the infrastructure a bit more as well too there. But yeah.
I will say one thing to keep in mind with all of this as well is that when everyone comes home and makes dinner at 6 at night, are you seeing the grid having issues with stuff like that? And we really don't. But the big thing is everything is becoming that much smarter in terms of how everything is being handled. So if a car is maybe struggling with getting the power of the 48 amps, it's usually smart enough to kind of like lower that amperage. And I think the utilities are looking at these aspects of their grid as well. And as Eric said, we're upgrading. I think that's another thing that we're seeing quite the ability to do that. And I think the future-wise is only going to keep getting better on that aspect.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Eric already said it, and I don't think it can be emphasized enough. You plug in your car when you go to bed, and you've turned everything else off. So you're really not consuming that much power. As well, the local businesses that are consuming power during the day, most of them have shut down all their machinery. So really on a balance of things, yes, there's a last mile issue, but generally the utilities have got more power at night than what they know what to do with. They often happen to sell it off cheap. And having you charge your car is a benefit to them. It's not a challenge for them.
Thanks, Andy. Next question is, for those who've owned their EVs for at least 3+ years or over 60,000 kilometers, do they know how much battery capacity has been lost due to battery aging? I've typically bought my ICE vehicles when they're a few years old and keep them for 7 to 10 years, just like me. Do best manage typical depreciation costs, but I'm worried that after 10 years, an EV battery might have lost too much capacity, or even worse, required replacing at huge cost. I think we've identified that batteries are lasting much longer, but the first part, have any of you noticed battery degradation in your 4+ years of EV ownership?
I guess I can start with my experience, I guess. So in our Volt EV, before we had, because also our battery was replaced under the recall as well too. But we had it for about 4 years, 80,000 kilometers before it was replaced. And we were noticing maybe 2-3% degradation, a slight amount of degradation, I would say. And then my Chevrolet Volt, that one I use almost a full charge every day in my Volt. I drive it almost right to the edge of its range every day. So we've hammered that battery pretty hard, and cycling it for 5 years and now 110,000 kilometers on it. And I would say I've seen maybe 5% degradation on the battery pack. So I've seen the slight amount, but not, it's one of those things where it's like, do I see degradation? Do I not? Am I seeing things? So it's maybe slightly noticeable, but maybe not. It hasn't been a huge amount of degradation.
Thanks, Eric. And I know that you have another appointment. If you can hang in here for a few minutes, that'd be great. If you need to go, leave when you need to go. Thanks.
I was going to say, just quickly in battery degradation myself, I might have noticed 130,000 kilometers, maybe 3%, 4%, maybe. But Eric and I will tell you, you probably need to talk to our buddy Rob, who's got over 400,000 on his, and I think he's at 8% degradation now. But I've seen so many articles of some EVs doing 500 to even 1,000 or 1,000,000 miles, and they get around on average 7 to 9% battery degradation. So it's quite honestly, I don't think it's as big of an issue as, to worry about.
No, and just to add in there, like ours, it hasn't even been any amount that we've actually noticed any degradation.
I see more degradation in my body after the age of 50.
Okay, we won't go there. In the 1970 Ontario Hydro, this is a question from the Q&A. In the 1970, Ontario Hydro had a huge incentives to convert to electric heat. 10 years later, the electric price was costing more than fossil fuel. Does anyone see history repeating itself as the world converts to EVs?
No.
Why not?
I'll say no, because 10 years ago, were you putting solar panels, in the 1970s, were you putting solar panels up in your house? No, because they cost way too much. And to give you an example of 12 years ago, when I did my first 10K system, a 210 watt panel was $900. I bought 530 watt bifacial panels for my recent solar thing for about $400. So solar has become way more cost effective, way more powerful, and you're now affecting the electricity price because you don't really have the electricity price. You are the actual producer that way. We didn't have that opportunity back in the 70s. And electric heat back then, well, we didn't have the heat pump technology that we have today. And heat pump technology, like I'm one step away in my home. This is the last gas product that I have in my home is the furnace. And already I'm seeing friends who have it say like easily 20-30% reduction from gas. So everything's become that much more efficient. I see the same with battery electric as well.
Yeah, just to jump in there too, Ian. As you know, my house, Ian knows it, at least my house, I've got a 9.5 kilowatt solar array on my house, and my house is all electric as well too. I have no gas hooked up to it at all. So I have a air source heat pump and a hybrid heat pump water heater. So basically, if hydro rates jump up, then people are going to start making their own power, and that's what's going to happen. They're now going to be in competition with microgrid. So it's an interesting world.
Thank you. And we're going to go to another question here. Are there bona fide studies comparing a variety of EV vehicles to help us select one that fits our needs and does not turn out to be a lemon and or to have to do unexpected maintenance, recalls, or be disappointed in performance? And we've already mentioned consumer reports. Are people aware of something more that helps with comparisons? And I know for myself, YouTube. was the place that I went to with people doing some comparisons and some reports and reviews on EVs. And when we went to it in 2017, when we started thinking about this, there has just been an explosion of the number of people doing comparisons between Teslas and Ionics, to name a couple, and others on YouTube. And it's just a matter of putting in the search to look at compare the models you want, and you're going to find a video that somebody's done.
Yeah. You know, Eric and I, we run Waterloo Regional Electric Vehicle Association. I think the comparisons that you need to do is to come out to like National Drive Electric Week when we host that. And the biggest comparison, talk to all the EV owners and ask why the 500 plus members that we have, not one of them would go back to gas. And then of course, when you want to narrow it down to the electric vehicle aspect, yeah, it becomes a personal preference. The gentleman that drove his Ioniq 5, 19,000 plus kilometers from Quebec to Mexico and back, I really picked his brain about what he loved about that Ioniq and what he didn't love. And there was very little that he didn't love about it. But it's, you know what, the personal preference becomes, you know, the body styling, the paint color, the options that you got, and everything. But I think we're at a point now, lemons and in the EV world, can't say I really know of too many lemons. To be honest, I really haven't heard anyone tell me that, wow, I wish I would have never bought in this vehicle. I can't say I've ever heard that.
I could add to that a little bit in that like we did also use YouTube as well. That was kind of helpful for comparison. But we also went to an EV show, and it had a bunch of owners with their vehicles there, and they were there to like talk to us and answer questions. And if the owners were comfortable, they actually would let you drive the vehicle. So, you know, just a bit of a different way of like learning about the different ones and comparing them. Like, I found that really helpful too. And there they gave us a plug share pamphlet that you know, listed a lot of the different EVs at the time, because this was 2019, and you know, kind of what their features and range were. And that was, you know, we used that also to help us figure out what was right for us. So yeah, I mean, EV shows happening too.
We did, in addition to the YouTube, we did two other things. We went to a local Riva, and it was in Cambridge, the EV show, and then another one at City Hall, which was put on by Plug and Drive, in which we got a chance to drive a variety of vehicles, line up and wait to drive. But we also booked in a test drive at Plug and Drive, and were able to drive, I think it was 3 different vehicles in the time that was allotted to us, with people who were very knowledgeable about chargers as well as the cars that Plug and Drive had. So all of that helped us make a decision. I was turned off the Bolt when we first sat in it because of what the seat was felt like, the driver's seat. That was an earlier model. And when we actually got into the newer model, we haven't had a problem with that at all. The only thing I've thought about in my Bolt was I would like to be able to pull a trailer, but it's warranty doesn't say I can. So we have a small utility trailer, and it has made a few small trips, but range does go down. And any other comments on comparisons and how you do that and make your decision? Then another question in front of us is, do most of the panel EV owners have 12,000 kilometers as their service schedule recommended by the auto dealers?
Mine is every 6 months, and they like give me a reminder for it.
Did they ask to change your oil?
They give us reminders every 6 months too. I end up going once a year just to get my brakes lubed. And
They also don't go every 6 months either.
I just comment that it's not 12,000 kilometers, it's twice a year. They do a battery check and so on in the spring, basically the anniversary of when I bought the car. And I have the brakes looked at. In the fall, I just have the winter tires put on. I think Ian said that before, and so did Eric. Yeah, it's to go and get your tires swapped, and basically the car tested once a year. That's all we've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And a similar question to that, does everyone service their BEV at dealers, or are local mechanics become capable of BEV maintenance? And I'll just answer, we have our brakes serviced locally. We do go back to the dealer for that once a year check.
Can I just ask Neil, with respect to the once a year or whenever you bring it in, are there any problems associated with warranties if you don't bring it back in according to what the manufacturer has asked? If they ask you to bring it in every 6 months and you don't, does it impact your warranty?
They are just the recommended service service intervals. And when I look at what's recommended for servicing, it's all check. So if things check out well once a year, there's no problem.
As you find when you do the tire swap between winter and summer, great time to do the brakes, to check them over. And if they need a lube up or anything like that, just do it then. Perfect.
Yep. And we have another question. What are the service charges for the annual testing or servicing? Have you run into that, Julie or Ashley?
Well, up front, I purchased something from Ford that allows me to come in once, twice a year. And in that time, when they service it, then I get my tires swapped. So I can't recall what I paid, but I paid at, like I said, up front. So I don't have to be going in every time and get out the credit card to worry about it. But I wanted to get winter tires put on it anyways, because I swear by winter tires on any vehicle I've ever driven. And I'm glad I've done it, and they'll look after at the dealership and they store them for me. So, and like, yeah, it's a good time to get everything just checked over quick.
And the cost.
Remember what sorry.
Go ahead, Ashley.
What the service fees were, because we had the brakes were placed and like had some other things on the bill too. So I don't remember what the service fees were.
And I think it depends on the dealer, the rate per hour that they charge, and the service is usually less than an hour, that checkup, when I've taken our small bolt in, so it's less than an hour. But you do wait for a couple of hours because you have to wait for it to get into line to get to the service tech. Andy.
I have a Nissan Leaf and electric vehicle high voltage battery test $39.95. That's what that costs.
Okay.
I just noticed there's talking about service. There was a comment here from Randy. So I'm just kind of looking ahead, but it kind of ties it all in. He says, can't we just actually use the brakes perhaps once a week, for example, to avoid the problem of them seizing up? So to that answer, Randy, remember that acceleration we talked to you about? You accelerate the car in a nice open area, and then you slam on those brakes, and I guarantee you whatever rust or anything else there is pretty much gone on that. That was my first, how do I put it? That was my first example of a Model 3 Performance, where the guy looked at me and said, "You ready?" Slammed it. I felt like Mike Tyson slammed my head into the back seat, and then he slammed on the brakes. And anyways, I've since done that with my car. Not to the point of what he did, but that will help you with the brake aspect as well.
Tesla tires have been complained about being very expensive due to the load carrying capabilities. What are the other owners experienced about tire pricing when compared to ICE vehicles? Good question. I'm just coming up to that. And I have been shocked by the sticker price on tires for EVs. Has anybody else been shocked in replacing tires for an EV? I just saw them at Canadian Tire's lowest price that I saw recently for an EV tire by Michelin, but it was going to be, well, I've forgotten the pricing, but it was more than any of the ICE 4-set tires that were listed. And it's listed as an EV tire. Any other comments?
I think that's marketing, right? Canadian Tire, talking about them, and in regards to also being Tesla tires. Tesla, if you're getting your tires from them, come on, you're going right to the manufacturing. You're going to pay a premium for that. But Canadian Tire, I got the Pilot Sport 4, I think they were called. And because I signed up for their credit card, I got a 1-year no interest equal payments for tires. Four of them were like $1,000. That's not much different than any gas vehicle. So keep an eye out on, especially spring's coming up. They will be having those sales, and yeah, don't buy. Again, it's so easy for us to get caught up in marketing, and we don't need to.
Jeff notes that he's had his serviced at local mechanics, his EV. Brakes and AC have been done locally. So he hasn't gone back to the dealer for that. Thanks for that, Jeff. And their 2020 Kia Soul required service every 12,000, and the cost was $90, including tax, each 12,000 Ks for John Shirley. Thank you. It's great getting the participants giving us answers here from their experience. One other, my local mechanic says that brakes should be serviced yearly anyways on a BEV or ICE. On my car, if I push the brakes harder, it forces the calipers to be used and not just the regen. That's true. Okay. Thanks. Jeff says to me, EVs are a bit heavier than comparable tire, but otherwise they should be similar. Right. And that's what I did for my snow tires. There weren't any EV tires out. So it was a regular tire that I got, and I was in on a lottery. So I got them for free. Okay. So out of all of the questions, how much does it cost to operate an EV per 100 kilometers? Is there a website or online calculator that can help me figure that out?
That's a tough one, because if you went from a Kona EV to a Ford Mustang EV to a Tesla, they're all going to be different aerodynamically and the amount of kilowatts they use per 100 kilometers. But to be fair, I think you're looking at about anywhere from $1 to $2 for 100 kilometers, if that. Well, about that. And again, here's the other question. What time did you charge your EV at? Did you do it, off peak, on peak, mid peak? Because that's, now you're going to go 100 kilometers. And if you did it on peak, well, your 100 kilometers is going to cost you more than if you did it off.
And if you're on time of use, it varies during the day and the season of the year.
Yes. You can't do that with gas.
Right. Whatever it is, EVs are much less, cost much less than ICE vehicles to drive 100 kilometers, no matter how you cut the cake in terms of just buying the fuel. right now. Okay. Okay, I own there's a question here. I own a 2007 Suburban 2500 in excellent condition. When I do the math of buying a new EV, my Suburban annual cost, including repairs, is much lower than going to a new car. And yes, and I would just say that's probably true and that's why I would keep a car for 10 years. But at the 10-year mark, I started to get into more and more repairs on my ICE vehicles. And so usually we traded off or looked at a different car around the 10 to 12-year mark. And so at 2007, that was our Murano was a 2007, and it was in for major repairs in 2018. That's when we had to change cars.
Yeah. Can we be fair about this? You're saying a 2007 Chevy Suburban, and you're comparing this to a new EV. Why don't you compare it to a 2023 Chevy Suburban? I'm sure that that's going to cost you also way more with the car payments, etc. And you may not have as much in maintenance because it's a new car, but yeah, you know, that's great. If you're making that work for you and financially that's working for you, then I look at it this way. Take the money that you're saving on that and bank it, invest it, so that when that 2007 isn't working for you anymore, you can look at even a used EV. And I think you'll notice a big cost difference once you get into that as well.
Thanks, Ian. Okay. Have you ever had a safety issue because your EV is so quiet, i.e. someone did not hear you coming? Anybody have that?
I have had people not hear me coming, like just driving in a parking lot. Like people, it hasn't really been a safety issue, I wouldn't say, but like I've had somebody who was kind of like walking out in front and like clearly didn't know I was behind trying to drive and like wasn't moving over. But like if you're paying attention, you know, to what other people are doing and not driving into them, then, you know, I think you'll be okay. I haven't had anybody like run out in front or anything. But
that would be
sometimes not hear you because you're quiet.
Yeah, it is quiet, although we have one grandson who is very knowledgeable about cars at 6 years old, and he talks about our noisy Bolt driving into the driveway. Anyway, the other thing, that was the one detrimental thing about the Bolt. It has a little warning about pedestrians, but it's just a little light down in the left-hand corner of the display, and you can miss that light very easily. I understand the newer vehicles have sound to go along with the pedestrian warning. So the 2019 had that deficiency as far as I'm concerned.
The Chevy Volt used to have this little pedestrian horn on the stock. It was just a little beep, and it was just a light, hey, I'm here, you know, watch yourself type of thing. I miss that, to be honest. Although I do like the Chevy with the Bolt and Volt, and they got these alien sounding, it is the best way I can describe it, for pedestrians to hear you kind of coming. I think it's pretty cool. But
that's in the newer models.
The newer models, yeah.
Okay.
Neil, I was just going to say, I am aware that I'm quiet. So when I'm in areas that pedestrians are around me, I just try to drive as slow as I can. And I'm just aware of my surroundings, knowing that they may not hear me coming. But then when I do back up, I have that, like a truck backing up, I beep when I back up so people know that I'm moving. So that's good going backward. But yeah, going forward, I have to be aware. I am very quiet and just drive slow and be on the defense.
If we were younger, we would just crank our rap tunes with "Yo, get out of the way, get out of the way," and they would definitely hear us.
Yeah. A good question here. Has anyone calculated your carbon footprint in owning a BEV, and is it a lot lower versus owning an ICE vehicle?
Big time. If you're okay, I'd like to answer this and just give me a little sec on this. This is a question that I have constant debates with. And I'm trying to give everyone kind of the perspective. When I hear, oh, you know, your car took 27 barrels of oil to make. Well, okay, all cars take a certain amount of energy to make, but the carbon footprint goes so much beyond what it just makes. The gas car, when you look at it, is like a heroin addict. It constantly needs to be fueled with oil. And what people do not realize is that oil and gas involves a huge amount of energy in mining, refining, the power to do the refining, the transportation costs, and you're turning around and you're burning this fuel. And this is the big one. This is where I get with people really frustrated with. That gas engine is burning its fuel at around 15, maybe 20% efficient. So every $10 you spend, about $1.50 is moving your wheels, and the rest of it's gone in heat and friction. So when you're talking about the carbon footprint, let's go back to the heroin addict. You are beholden to the oil companies to constantly provide you that fuel. I'm charging my car with solar. So yeah, my carbon footprint is a way less. And, you know, I ran for the Green Party back in 2019, and my big sort of promotion, if you want to say, was that all energy has consequence, all of it. If we want to build a home, we're going to probably have to clear some trees down, build a house, use the lumber to build the house. But once it's done, it's done. And electric vehicles is the same thing. Lithium takes on average a year is about 14 million tons. The oil and gas industry is about 27 billion tons when it comes to supplying what we are doing with our transportation needs. So that carbon footprint, yeah, it's way, way lower. I haven't even talked about healthcare costs with the gas transportation sector. And, you know, Eric will tell you, like, I'm a big proponent about that aspect too, because we are all taxpayers. But as taxpayers, I didn't ask to invest in oil and gas companies or the healthcare industry, and yet gas transportation affects the healthcare industry huge. That also to me is like a footprint as well. So my little rant, maybe, if you want to say, but it's really frustrates me because, you know, like I said, everything has a consequence, but the consequences of the consequence are so limited when it comes to electric vehicles. Just look at the batteries. Like I mentioned, we can recycle those over and over. What part of recyclability are you doing in oil and gas? None whatsoever.
And Ian, is it correct to say that in a battery electric vehicle, that after you've driven about the first 5,000 to 8,000 kilometers, because you're not emitting carbon in that driving, you have actually paid back the mining that went into and the manufacturing carbon footprint? It's
closer to 20,000 kilometers. It's basically 1 year of driving. But again, that could depend on the car and the amount of the size of the battery as well. But on average, it's about 15 to 20,000 kilometers. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I think there's a really good article link in the resource document specifically on this question. So, isn't there, Neil? Do you remember that?
I just, I don't have that document open right now, but that may well be.
Yeah, they don't need to open. I think there's a good one there on that.
And there's another person in the Q&A that says, we have a Kona EV that has a humming noise for safety at lower speeds. So looking at the safety of a particular vehicle, and again, these are personal preferences that you can find what you want in the offerings that are available. And there are more offerings coming on all the time. Would any of the panelists believe that the current market has a shorter new purchase wait times for PHEVs, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles versus BEV? I don't know the answer to that one.
Depends on the manufacturer, right? I've heard of, like, I actually got an email from Hyundai Waterloo saying, hey, we got a Kona that is now needing an owner, and we posted it and it was gone within a few days. But that's the shorter time that I've heard of. In general, I hear everything from 2 to 3 months to 2 to 3 years.
I have friends who ordered a Hyundai Ioniq, and they're waiting 2 years for it. And it was originally supposed to be less, and it got extended to more times. So that particular car is a wait.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I too heard about someone that is on, I think, a 2-year wait list for the Toyota RAV4 plug-in hybrid.
Mhm. So the supply chain issues are not over yet.
Unless you want a great big pickup truck that guzzles gas.
Yeah.
So the only one, we will have a link in the resource document that looks at Edmunds looking at the fuel economy for the true cost of powering an electric car. And of course, Edmunds is American based, and they're looking at different areas of the country and the different costs of electricity in a deregulated electrical environment in the United States. So those are the questions that I have seen. Is anybody else wanting to? Okay, I've got 2 questions here. Just let's see. Right, just a comment. Use the vehicle until its life is over. In terms of a gas vehicle, the 2007 Suburban. You also need to compare a new EV versus a new comparable vehicle, not comparing to an existing vehicle. My 2006 Prius is cheaper to run than any new vehicle. And again, as long as a vehicle is serviceable, you will find that you are paying more for a new, a different vehicle. There's the climate emergency piece to consider, and there's the piece of what your own costs. Right now, the upfront costs of an electric or a plug-in hybrid are higher. What we've been trying to say is that the cost of ownership is lower.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other benefits to the electric vehicles that are not factored into actual cost that you pay out of your pocket. The cost to the environment, the cost to healthcare of our dependency on fossil fuels. So I have a brother and a coworker both waiting for FEV and BEV vehicles greater than 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's absolutely true. The wait times now are because of supply chain issues. I was surprised to get an offer on our Bolt this morning and to the request to test drive a new Bolt EUV, which I'm not going to do. But then I decided I'm going to look. There are many dealers that do have on their lots right now Bolt EUVs all ready to go for sale in our area. So the issue is look for the car that you're interested in, or that you get an email telling you you should be interested in it, and see where it's offered. I'll just say very quickly that that's more of a marketing, like the Bolt EUV is a bit larger car, bit heavier, and a bit more space. But you can look at the comparison online at any GM dealer or GM Canada.
There was one question earlier about the cost of insurance for battery versus ICE vehicles. And Ian answered it saying it should be cheaper as insurance based on safety, but I think it's also dependent upon which particular model or make you're buying and their likelihood of being stolen. I think that's the highest factor in the cost of insurance from what I understand. So, but they should be cheaper. I agree.
And we've been using acronyms, and an EUV is an electric utility vehicle. That's how they're marketing that one. A little bit more space, so it's a utility vehicle.
I just have to head out a little bit early.
Okay, thanks, Ashley.
Welcome. Bye.
So that ends our question times. Oh, just one more. I've heard that hybrid cars need to be driven at least 10 kilometers per outing in order to recharge. Do you find this to be true?
No, I have a 2013 Toyota Prius, and the engine goes off when it doesn't need the battery and you're traveling at low speed. And the hybrid, it'll kick in when it needs it. You don't have, I can go down to the corner gas station and back without the battery ever, or without the engine ever kicking on. But if I start to go up a bit of an incline, yeah, it'll turn. It just turns itself on and off. So it's nothing to do with any minimum distance or anything like that. At least with the Prius.
I know that when you have a 100% charge on a battery electric vehicle, it will not recharge until you get down below the first 5 to 8% of that battery usage, and then it starts to regen again. Following an accident, how do repairs compare?
I can answer that one because I got sideswiped within the first year of owning my car, and it got repaired no problem, just regular sort of body shop that way. And I don't know that they treat it much different than any other car, to be honest. I don't think there is that much of a difference that way. If you're thinking about maybe with the battery pack or anything like this, again, it's, you get a gas engine, you get electric components. It's not really overly that much different.
And does anyone's insurance provider charge more for house insurance because of an EV's difficulty of putting out the battery fire?
How many battery fires have we had?
25 total.
Yeah. So the insurance goes on statistics, probabilities, everything else. No.
No, I've just had my house insurance go up because of everybody's houses being hit by intense climate issues, flooding, etc. And they actually told me that. That's when I asked, why is it going up? Is getting a wheel locking system a good idea because EVs are susceptible to theft? I haven't heard that EVs are any more susceptible to theft. In fact, I think they aren't stolen quite as much as ICE cars, but I don't have any statistics to base that on.
I think too that most EVs have apps now on their phones where you actually know where they're parked. So yeah, good luck. You're going to steal it. Where are you going to run? Right. Like, yeah.
It's interesting. My son-in-law's EV, it was a plug-in hybrid EV, was rear-ended by a much smaller car that hit both the front and rear wheels in the rear ending of it. It was written off. It is now in a European country because they haven't switched the tracking on it. He found where it was in the insurance company bought it from him and gave him a settlement, but it went to he found where it was, Then he looked on Google Maps to find, well, that's near a repair shop. And then it's been transported overseas, and he knows exactly where it is, and he can look. And right now it's just sitting in a yard in another European country. Ian, you've got a question direct to you. Do you see it there?
Yeah, would I buy a used Model 3? Most definitely. The one thing, and I know I don't want to get into the whole this EV versus that, but the one thing I love is that you could take that used Model 3 and get the diagnostics done at the Tesla service and find out the battery health, lots of, stuff about it. I mean, that's one thing that's kind of interesting with that company is they really can tell you a lot about the vehicle. And so, yeah, get it checked out. And yeah, most definitely would consider the used one.
I think that's the key thing is getting it checked out first. Like who are you buying it from? If you're buying it from a Tesla shop, or are you buying it from some guy that's standing on the side of the curb, so I'd be very careful and make sure just where you're getting it from.
Mm-hmm.
Same as any car.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that is happening as I'm reading different materials is that they are coming up with systems that can really put the batteries and the vehicle to a test to see compared to a standard where it fits in terms of how much you can depend on that vehicle. That's in that one reference in our resource sheet. So we're very close to 9 o'clock. It's 8:57. And at this point, we have gone through 52 Q&As plus 11 pre-conference or pre-webinar questions. Is there anything else that any of you want to say or any other questions from those who are listening at this point?
I would say that, the more you can chat with people who drive electric vehicles, the more you're going to get the real story about things. Always be careful of just, this analogy of the glass half empty, half full. And then there's those who have no glass whatsoever. I recently heard that one. Yeah, just, get lots of commentary from EV owners and like ourselves with the panelists tonight. And, I'm hoping I don't come across myself personally as being overly positive, but to be honest, it's exciting. I love what I'm seeing with the electric vehicle world because, here will be my last point. Y'all want to beat inflation? Buy an electric vehicle, get the solar on your house, and learn to be energy independent because, we live in our homes really when you think about 95% of the time, unless we do trips and everything else, we can charge our cars doing the exact same thing. So that energy independence, it's an investment up front, that's for sure, but man, does it pay off. And I've seen that over my time of doing this.
Well, thank you all. And I'm going to turn this back over to Tom now. So, Tom.
Thanks, Neil. Thank you for running our Q&A this evening. And thank you to all of our panelists for doing a great job answering questions. I'd like to bring the webinar to a close by first thanking our supporters one more time, Kindred Credit Union, the Township of Wilmot, and Future Ground Network, a project of the David Suzuki Foundation. I'd also like to remind everyone that you will be receiving an email in 3 to 4 days that will include a link to a recording of this webinar, an updated version of the resource document that we've been referring to this evening, a link to the webinar feedback survey if you don't get a chance to fill it out tonight, and also details regarding specific actions that you can take to show solidarity with Indigenous members of our Waterloo Region community if you would like to do that. So once again, I would like to thank all of our speakers and panelists tonight for doing such a great job. I'd also like to thank all of our participants tonight. Thank you for joining us this evening. I hope that you have learned something new with all of the answers that we've provided today. I know a lot of people have concerns and questions about electric vehicles, and we hope we've done our small part tonight to help you maybe get a little bit closer to making that decision of going out and purchasing an electric vehicle. So that's it for us for tonight. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening.